all of this system, there is no forgiveness, there is no compassion, and that people's lives are being systematically destroyed through this crisis.
Well, I say, we operate within our remit, and there's nothing we can do to fundamentally change the system as obviously you would like. And that really is a matter for the government, and obviously for a group of people to try and direct the government through their votes, or setting up an alternative political party or something. But those aren't matters we can actually say. We have to operate within the remit we have, and then the rules set out for us as a state-owned central bank.
Well, I can see what you're saying, and I can see the constraints that are placed upon you, and those constraints are a little bit like all of the employees that are used within corporations that can't actually speak their free mind. They can't speak from their heart. They have to follow the protocols and policies that have been set down by others. But when it comes to actually challenging and speaking to those others, we can't get audience. They are unreachable. We end up speaking to their gatekeepers. And the fundamental questions that need to be asked, which is, this level of debt. I remember in 2003, there was this summit going on in Gleneagles, where the world leaders were supposedly gathering in order to resolve and get rid of the 2/3 world debt. And then something else happened and diverted their attention, and it's all been forgotten about. So somewhere through this, a great deal of money is passing into the hands of a very few people, whether they're who it is that owns the pension funds, who it is that owns all of these stocks. Well, one of the questions that people like me have been asking, to whom is all this money owed?
Mm-hmm.
And where is the morale in this? Because, as I say, if people are borrowing money, but the money that they're going to need to pay in terms of interest is not put into existence, it follows. And you're saying that it's people have got to receive their returns on their investments. But if I look at the level of investments and the level of lending, there's not a relationship between them. They're not the same, are they?
Well, no, because the effect of fractional reserve banking.
Right, which multiplies the debt.
Well, not really, no, because it still comes down to the same. I say, if I lent you £100 and you lent on £90 and third person lent on £81, etc., etc., it still comes back to my original £100.
Yeah, but if you lent me £100 and I've got to pay you £110, but that other £10 didn't exist, I'm stuck.
Yeah, but that comes from you lending it on to somebody else, etc., etc., to the final.
No, I've spent that £100 on putting a house up that I'm now living in.
Well, no, well, yeah, but
that money is now tied up in the asset that is my house, and then I can't pay that last £10, and this is what's happening. I can't pay that last £10, and the bank come along and they say repossessed. They never possessed it in the first place, but they take it back. They take it away.
Well, whilst that is obviously extremely distressing for the people concerned,
it kills a lot of people.
I can't quite see how you could have an alternative system, because it would be unfair to those who do pay their debts.
Well, let's put it like this. If I borrowed you £100 and I paid you £100 back, that's it. That's what it should be.
Yeah, but then I haven't had the use of that £100 for the period you've had it.
Well, I don't either if it's gone into my home.
But yeah, but there's zero incentive for me to lend you that money, isn't there?
Well, okay, so what we're down to then is that the only incentive that are going to be there is for people that have to have a right to take the sweat equity. In fact, it's terminal, effectively, that system. It's absolutely terminal.
I think.
Well, it is terminal to the extent that this is what we see. I mean, the point
unless you have a society of philanthropists, you are not going to get a situation where people are prepared to lend money for nothing.
In which case, what should happen is that great swathes of the population should turn round and return to contracting directly with each other. Because I've worked for a lot of very rich.
Fine.
I've worked for a lot of these very rich people. Okay, people who earlier this year I was working out in less than 5 degrees centigrade, digging in the ground. Right, a long hard day, and my customer would come back and say they were tired because they'd played a round of golf. It's abhorrent. And the problem that we have is that as people become more desperate, which is what is beginning to happen, we've seen these riots, that they will begin to go against those that they can see have all this unearned income, right? And the system rewards the professional leisurely classes. It encourages avarice. And when you start talk about incentive, at some point we're going to have to reach a situation where forgiveness is going to have to play a part, because at the moment it doesn't play any part whatsoever. There is no mercy in this system, and it is supported by people at the very top of this that are engaged in heinous acts.
Well, all I can say is really, because I think we've also been talking for a long time, is
we have.
that to change the system into what obviously you regard as a fairer system, and I do understand your point, it is going to have need a fundamental change by the government in how. I don't
trust government any longer. I really don't. In fact, I've removed all registrations, all consent from them. I've completely removed myself from any form of contract with them because it's not worked. It has failed terribly, and it's committing crimes. But this thing about the debt, one of the things that a lot of people have been doing with credit cards, especially, is turning around to these credit card companies and saying, "Can you please show us the full accounting?" Because if the credit that they're given has been created out of thin air, rather like that quantitative easing money you're talking about, there is no debt against it. There cannot be a debt. And then basically all we have here is certain individuals, certain institutions have the license to create obligations out of thin air. And at the end of the day, this money, all of this money, is really the people's money. And the really sad thing about it is that what this does is it actually removes people from the capacity to look after themselves. There was a story I came across earlier this year with a young couple who had inherited some money, bought a small holding down in the West Country, did it up, it was derelict, built themselves a garden, and then were evicted from it by the local authority because they weren't going to be generating any revenue for the local authority. It wasn't a business.
Well, I couldn't comment.
No, I know.
I don't know the insides out.
But that is the same. There's an analogy there that is exactly the same in the way that the banking system works and the idea of usury. And there's a huge problem in this. It does need. If it isn't solved, well, we all know what's going to happen, and it is happening already. And it's despicable to see what's happening across the United States. And it's despicable to see this government transgressing against the very people it's supposed to be serving, because it's doing it. It's about to close down all the ports and close down our ability to move. It's entering into all manner of security measures under this notion of terrorism, when the real terrorism is the economic terrorism that many people are suffering under. And it needs people...
I really do suggest you put those matters to them rather than to me, because here at the bank is nothing we would have control over.
Well, ultimately, you and I, and everyone else, are all equal under the law. And believe me, I've tried to communicate with these people, but they're not interested. They're not prepared to talk. They're not prepared to solve a problem that keeps them comfortably numb. And they're criminals, a lot of them. UK Column will show you that. If you go and have a look at UK Column, power creates corruption, and that's what we have. And ultimately, all that I am seeking, and all that the people that I talk with are seeking, is remedy. because the actual energy of people, the real equity, which is the people, which are the land and the resources, needs to stay with them. They've got they can solve these problems. But these centralized institutions that have gained, for whatever reason, the license to print a debt, which is terminal to the extent that there's never a capacity for it to be repaid. Not when you look at the bigger cycle, which explains beautifully why it is that this crisis that's come about. I mean, it is terminal to the extent that I think we're looking at multiple generations to address this debt, this indebtedness, aren't we?
Well, I don't know, Drew. Obviously depends on what happens in the economy, etc., etc., etc. But as I say, I think these are issues.
Well, nothing can happen in the economy
beyond what we can help you with. So
yeah, but nothing can happen in the economy if there's no money in it. The only way that can happen is if big multinational corporations come in and take over, which is what we see. Council houses now are being sold on through the banks to corporations. That's the public asset going into the hands of private corporations and banks. That's very dangerous. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, you're very welcome.
I really appreciate it. You've given me a few more insights into it. I would ask you, I mean, if you're up for it, I would ask you to come and get involved in some of the debate with ordinary people, because increasing numbers of people here in this country are saying we don't want to contract with government anymore. It has created this mess. It's not ordinary people that have done this, because they've been kept like mushrooms. They're not told how this system really works. And the education system is stratified according to demographics, so that even people within the upper echelons don't really know. They've just been given one perspective. But we do need to address this problem. We needed to address it decades ago when we saw those things happening overseas. But it's getting worse. Libya is an example of it. I understand Gaddafi had actually moved back to gold and given control of his country over to his people and the tribes people. And that was a threat to the dollar and the dollar bourse, the oil bourse. So this is the last lashings, if you like, of a hegemonistic empire that's wreaking havoc, and it's doing so to people in its own, in this country and in the United States, and it's deplorable. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.